Well, hey everybody, welcome back to the Iowa State University Beef Teaching Farm. Today we're going to talk to all of you about something that I'm guessing if you've been in the cattle business or any livestock industry long enough, you've gone out to do chores in the morning, find something like this, frozen water. We're going to give you guys a couple of tips right after this, show you guys how to avoid this so we can spend more time looking at cattle during the day. Welcome back. One of the things I think we're all familiar with this time of the year, we're standing out here shooting this video. It's 8 below. We're going to be down to 20 below zero ambient air temperatures here over the weekend. Our frozen waters. It's inevitable at some point we're all going to have one. We're going to go over some tips here in the shop, some of the equipment that we use, and a couple little tricks we've learned over the years, not just on the red and yellow brand, but a lot of the brands of waters that we have here at the farm. We've sure got a lot of different brands, so we're pretty familiar with working on all of them, that we do early in the year to make sure that when it gets into cold weather, we're not chasing our tails here a little bit, and we are only fixing parts that will have failed during the year and not stuff that may have failed over the summer that we didn't catch until it gets really cold. We'll go in the shop and talk to you about that equipment. Well, hey everybody, welcome back to the Beef Teaching Farm. We're standing here in our shop, and we're going to go over kind of some of the things that we keep on hand here to make sure that it's not a last-minute scramble and we have water issues around the farm. We keep a really good supply of our supply line heaters. We prefer one brand, and we run those in pretty much any brand of water that we've got. They're a self-regulating one. We're not messing around with making sure that we have to have our heat tapes touching metal pipes, because with a lot of our new installs, we've gone to 100% poly pipes and brass fittings. So the old style of heat tape will no longer work for us. That keeps our supply lines free and open, coming up through those frost tubes that we've got underneath all of our waters. The other thing that we do is we keep a variety of floats on hand. We've got red and yellow waters, we've got blue waters, we've got green waters, and we've got some energy-free waters. So we got to stock a lot of different parts. We've kind of moved in one direction. There's a couple of companies that we really kind of prefer anymore to work with. The other one that we keep around, and you can buy them at most of your farm stores, are just these submersible heaters, or people might call them bird bath heaters. I like to run the 500 watt ones. They do run a lot more energy. We've got individual electric meters on a lot of our waters, so I can tell you that when we start getting into this cold weather, it does cost us quite a bit of electricity on some of these different brands of waters to keep them open. Some of them not as bad. If your water runs a thermostat system, we keep thermostats on hand as well as heating elements for those. Float support brackets in case we break those. Different types of floats. This one's actually for our horse farm up on campus. Their floats for a lot of these companies are for different PSIs. It's important to know how much water PSI you've got so that you put the right float in and don't end up with a situation where you either are not refilling the water enough or you don't have adequate flow to meet your livestock needs. We keep mineral oil. We're going to go outside here and show you the importance of mineral oil. And then we keep a very basic bag of tools here. And this usually rides around in a pickup with me so that if I've got a problem, I've got about everything that I need. A really important one is a voltage tester. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get out there as to why I keep a voltage tester. Just your basic electrical things. You use whatever tools you think you need. On our energy-free waters, we've got some round black ones. It's a pretty notable company. I think everybody can probably figure out what company this is. But when we're not using our energy-free waters that are earth heated, we actually put the lids back on them just so that we don't have to worry about them freezing in the winter on us. So that way when we go and open those up, we know 100%, if we're going to go out on a new patch of swath grazing, we can take this lid off, we break a little bit of ice, and we're good to go. On our frost-free waters that are our energy-free ones, we do have to break a little bit of ice every morning. That's the way that particular water is designed. On our ball waters, we have some energy-free ball-style waters. We've got some black ones and some yellow and red ones. Really make sure on the underside of those lids, there's actually a heating cable that goes around them. for when we get into really sub-zero temperatures like this. It'll actually keep your balls from freezing up into the lid on those waters and keep that water open. Read your manual on your water and understand what the settings are for that water. Just because Grandpa used to do something with his water does not mean that this new one that you bought 5 years ago is going to be the same way. A lot of the water height settings on a lot of these energy-free waters that run the balls or floating discs really is the trick on keeping them open and not freezing either floating discs or water suspended balls up to the lids on those waters. Every water comes with an owner's manual. Read it, understand it. This is one of our owner's manuals off of one brand of water that we use here. We keep them all in a file so that we can refer back to them if we have questions. The biggest thing that I can tell you is stock parts. After a while, we have a pretty good idea about how many each individual valves, parts, heating elements, submersible heaters, line heaters that we need to keep on hand. And usually throughout the middle of the winter, we don't buy much for parts. In the fall, we go through all of our waters and make sure all of our components are functioning properly. If we've removed our submersible heaters, for me, October 30th is when we're going to put those submersible heaters back in those waters. If we get colder before then, we might have to drop them in before. But take notes. Remember which waters you're going to remove those submersible heaters on if you choose to do that, so that it's not a last minute thing when you've got a frozen water and then we start breaking lines and everything else. So have your tools, have your parts ready to go so that when you do have problems, you've got everything. If we do our job correctly in the fall, when we get into these really cold spells, the only thing we should be replacing are components that have failed throughout the year since we went through those waters last. So we're not having a surprise where the first cold snap, we start freezing supply lines, which might not have been a problem when we were at 20 degrees. The other tip that I will give you guys is make sure that your water is sized correctly for the amount of livestock that you're going to have on it. We have run into some issues before where we just don't have enough head drinking off of water. If we can, we'll block one side of that water off. If you look at the specs on these waters, not a very big water can service about 25 to 50 head of cattle. So maybe if I've only got 20 and it starts getting really cold, we'll block one side off. We've had it before where one side will ice over. So understand your water, what its capacities are. If you need to, if your cattle can still get adequate water access, block them off one side so that way you're running more volume of water through one side of your water, and you'd be surprised how easier your life will be and keep those waters from freezing on you. There's a couple other things that we do that really helps our water components with their longevity. One of those is we're very religious about cleaning our waters out throughout the year. Our drinking bowls are cleaned about every week. A really long spell for us might be 10 days going without cleaning a water. What that does is it doesn't ever let your submersible heaters get buried in a bunch of junk in the water, and water is the most important nutrient to animals, so we want to make sure that we're offering clean, fresh water all the time. The other thing that we keep with us to thaw out waters is we actually just use a really cheap hairdryer. Some people I know use water to dump on them. I would really advise people against that if you're using electricity in it, because you're kind of inviting a whole host of problems. If we have a water that does freeze up on us, it should be because we had a component fail, not that something's just, one day it just randomly freezes. If it's freezing, there's a problem in it, we need to figure it out. First step to that is we'll open up our side access and we'll actually put a hairdryer in here. These are actually designed to be used around wet things. They have a GFCI reset on them, or a GFIC. So they're meant to be used around a water, around a sink in a bathroom. We'll plug these into an extension cord. We'll make sure that livestock cannot get at that. And then we'll put it under there and we'll actually close that side door on it and we'll let this go. The thing that I really like about a hairdryer versus a heat gun is it does not get hot enough to melt any of our components under our water or harm our water itself, and we can thaw that water out. The other thing is when we come up to a water, there's some things we can look at right away. The water that you guys will see in the intro of this is actually a water that we have not been using. But if I came up to that water and I saw that it was all frozen like that and I had frozen water in a bowl and I lifted the top and saw there was frozen water in there, I have a submersible heater out. If I come up to a water and there's absolutely no water in it and it's 100% dry, I probably have a supply line issue. So there's a little bit of diagnosis that we can do right when we come up to it, and that helps with knowing how your waters work. We have 2 heating components in ours. For the most part, on a lot of these waters, we have a line heater, a supply line heater, and then we have a submersible heater in the water. So those are just a few things that you can check if you come up to a frozen water and are wondering, man, I wonder what's wrong here. So don't mind the color or the brand of this water. What I'm here to show you guys on is we were just in this water this morning. We had a heat tape that had failed on it. So we had to open up this water. So some of these waters are designed that when you take this lid off, there's a kind of recessed part, and if you look down here in the water itself, there's this big channel. What the original design, and a lot of these companies that design them this way, is this is supposed to be filled with water and freeze that water lid in to keep your heat in. What I've learned over the years is one trick that I like to do, because there's nothing worse than trying to get into a water that you've already got problems with and the top is frozen on, is I fill that with light mineral oil, and what that does is it allows you to get back into this water and still work on it if you need to, but it also keeps it sealed. Mineral oil also does not evaporate in the summer, so you don't have to worry about filling these back full later on in the fall. So it's not toxic to the cattle. I use veterinary grade mineral oil, and it's one of the ways that I like to keep these open. The other thing I'd like to point out, and I see a lot of people do it, and I know it's really convenient in the winter, really try and refrain, if you've got a frozen water, of dumping hot water over your water components to try and thaw it out. What I see happen a lot when we've had students do it in the past, that's why we've gone away from it as our protocol, is that water wicks down that gets in your electrical connections, and on a lot of our wire nuts, if we don't have a really perfect connection under them, it'll get in there, and if it does freeze, it'll split the wire nut, and we've had bad connections due to it. What we like to do, we'll show the side panel on this water. We take a hair dryer, we'll show you that. We stick a hair dryer under it because a hair dryer cannot get hot enough to melt any of our rubber hoses or any of our electrical components under there, and we'll put our lid back on. We'll make sure the cattle can't get to a drop cord. Sometimes we'll have to use a generator if we're somewhere where we don't have power readily available, and we'll walk away and we'll let that hair dryer thaw it out for us. So the one thing I want to caution everybody about is that on a lot of these automatic waters, we're using a lot of electrical components. We have a high risk of bad connections, stray voltage. Make sure your waters are properly grounded. If you don't feel comfortable wiring it yourself, have an electrician do it. But the one thing that I like to carry with me when I'm working on waters or even checking them is a non-voltage it's a volt alert. This one's made by the Fluke company. What I like about this is it's really easy for me to check these components and see if we have power to them. I can just touch it to my connections and my light will go red and it'll beep for me to tell me that I do have power to those components. Sometimes if they're insulated well, like right there, I had to go to the back side. But what that does, it tells me that my line heater, which keeps my supply line open, is working. And then we run these submersible heaters in these as well. The other thing that you can do is if you would have a short and the water may be live, I've always cautioned people about shoving your hand in an automatic water this time of year, or an electrical component could be bad. You can put the voltage tester in the water, and if it is live, this will beep telling you that you do not want to stick your hand in that. We always shut the power off to them before we work on them, but this is just another way, same way if you're wiring in your house, you can make sure that that power is shut off and you're not getting a backfeed somewhere so that you can work on it safely.